Wedding plot twist. Best man steals spotlight, but we had the last laugh. Hey everyone. You won't believe what I'm about to share with you today. I mean, we've all heard crazy wedding stories, but this one takes the wedding cake. Pun absolutely intended. As many of you know, Jake and I have been friends since college, and when he asked me to be his best man, I was honored. We've been through thick and thin together, and I knew this was going to be the most epic adventure yet. Fast forward to the day of the wedding, and we're all set up at the upscale event venue in the city center. We spent hours taking photos, enjoying the beautiful weather, and of course, drinking plenty of cold beer. But little did we know, there was a major plot twist waiting for us. As Jake was about to give his heartfelt speech, everything went eerily quiet. And then, in a shocking turn of events, the best man stole the spotlight, completely upstaging Jake's moment. Now, I know what you're thinking. How could this be? But let me tell you, it gets even better. The star of the show was, believe it or not, Jake's eccentric great-aunt Agnes. She had planned the whole thing, down to the last detail. We were all stunned, to say the least. But in a bizarre turn of events, Agnes started rapping, completely improvising a hilarious and heartfelt poem that brought the whole room to tears. I kid you not, it was like something out of a Shakespearean play. Needless to say, Jake was more than a little relieved, and the whole room joined in, dancing and singing along to Agnes's impromptu performance. And as for me, well, I had the last laugh as the best man. And we all left that crazy wedding celebration still buzzing from the unexpected turn of events. The week of my wedding was supposed to be all about preparation and relaxation before the big day. But as fate would have it, this was when things started to take a dramatic turn. My supposed best friend had other plans in mind, and they didn't exactly involve making my special day memorable in a good way. As I was getting ready with my bridesmaids, I noticed a peculiar buzz of excitement in the air. We had all been looking forward to this day for what felt like an eternity, and the anticipation was palpable. But what caught our attention were the numerous phone calls and hasty whispers that were going around. My bridesmaids would often glance at their phones, then quickly conceal the screens, trying to avoid raising suspicion. At first, I brushed it off, thinking that it was just the usual pre-wedding jitters getting to everyone. But as the day went on, I couldn't help but notice that my best friend was constantly receiving calls and wasn't returning any of them. His behavior was particularly suspicious given that we had a pre-wedding party to attend to that evening. Cue the night of our pre-wedding celebration. Things started taking a turn for the worse around 9 p.m. when we arrived at the venue. I mention that time specifically because it was then that I caught a glimpse of my supposed best friend flirting shamelessly with a few women at the bar. Yes, you read that right in front of my face and in public. Not a single hint of hesitation crossed his face. No whispers, no apology, nothing. We were about to get married in a few hours, and it seemed like he had entirely forgotten about that fact. The group of us quickly grew uncomfortable, and it wasn't long before we excused ourselves to give him some space. Any rational person can guess what happened next. His attention went straight to the ladies, completely disregarding the rest of us. Fast forward a few years, rumor had it that my supposed best friend ended up getting stranded in a distant country after a misadventure that clearly involved the ladies he had given his undivided attention to. I won't reveal more than that, preferring to let the details remain private, but I will say that stories about his mishap made their way back to us, only serving as a slap in the face of what was left of any lingering memories of a connection I once had with him. My wedding day no longer felt ruined or overshadowed, for in the end, karma did its job. Justice was served in the most perfect way possible given the circumstances. I'll never underestimate the power of revenge, sweet revenge, and how one act of betrayal has the power to tie its knot in the soul. It was a beautiful June afternoon, the sky a brilliant blue with just a few wispy clouds scattered about, as if nature itself had decided to join in the celebration of our special day. The venue was perfect, decorated with elegant white roses and soft pink peonies that added a touch of whimsy and romance to the air. My beautiful bride, Sarah, looked absolutely radiant as she prepared to walk down the aisle, her eyes sparkling with happiness and her smile lighting up the entire room. I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me as I gazed upon the woman I loved, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought us to this moment. Every detail had been carefully planned, from the intricate floral arrangements to the carefully crafted speeches. The music had been selected, the chairs had been arranged, and the guests were seated, leaving nothing but the final countdown to the big moment. I exchanged a nervous glance with my best man, Jake, who seemed to be trying to convey a message without saying a word. I chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters, thinking to myself, he's just worried about giving a good speech. But little did I know, Jake had been playing a much bigger role than I ever could have imagined. He had been acting suspiciously all morning, constantly checking his watch and fidgeting with something in his pocket. I thought it was just nerves, but looking back, it was clear he had been planning something. My maid of honor, Emma, had been whispering to him constantly, her eyes gleaming with a knowing look that made me feel like I was missing something. As I scanned the crowd, my eyes landed on Emma's stunned face. How could she not have seen it coming? We all knew Jake was a hopeless romantic. But did that really warrant interrupting our carefully planned ceremony? The gasps and murmurs of the guests still lingered in the air. My mom, seated in the front row, looked like she'd seen a ghost, or worse, a potential son-in-law. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and horror. I'm surprised she didn't faint on the spot, considering the stress of planning our big day. Sarah, on the other hand, was a sight to behold. Her furious expression was a perfect blend of embarrassment and amusement. I've never seen her look so beautifully bewildered in a wedding dress. Maybe I should have taken a photo. It would have made an unforgettable addition to our wedding album. The minister, determined to salvage the ceremony, cleared his throat and continued with the proceedings. But it was clear the moment had been irreparably lost. The focus had shifted from our love and commitment to Jake's outrageous stunt. As the ceremony finally came to an end, I extracted myself from the sea of confused faces and made my way to Jake. My anger was still simmering just below the surface, but I managed to keep my cool, just barely. When were you going to tell me about this? I asked, attempting to keep my tone light despite the turmoil inside me. Jake beamed with pride, oblivious to the chaos he'd caused. Tonight, bro, he replied with a chuckle. I thought it would be a memorable way to propose. We're celebrating love, right? Somehow, Jake still managed to seem genuinely perplexed by the furor he'd created. Maybe he genuinely thought his actions would be romantic, or perhaps he just wanted to steal the spotlight. Either way, it wasn't lost on me. This wasn't exactly the time or place I had in mind. I pressed on, trying to compose myself despite the flabbergasted looks we were receiving from the surrounding guests. Well, Jake said with a wry smile, I guess this means there'll be a double wedding after all. My eyes widened as I struggled to keep a straight face. Maybe, just maybe, we could salvage this strange, unconventional day and turn it into the unforgettable celebration of a lifetime. But for now, all I could think about was how to get Jake and his proposal ring out of sight before things escalated further. The reception was tense, to say the least. Half the guests were congratulating Jake and Emma, while the other half were giving them the death stare. I could tell my new wife, Emma, was trying to keep it together, but I could see the devastation in her eyes. Our special moment had been hijacked. Everyone's attention had shifted to me, the best man, who had just announced the surprise party for Jake. It was a reaction Emma and I had anticipated, but we didn't think it would come in such an awkward way. Now, the whole room was waiting with bated breath to see how Jake would react. The silence was awkward and oppressive, and I could feel Emma's eyes on me, begging for me to redirect the conversation. But I didn't want to let the moment go. So with a smile on my face, I raised my glass and invited everyone to raise theirs. To Jake and Emma, I said, may their love continue to grow stronger with each passing day. The room erupted in applause, and for a moment, all the tension dissipated. It wasn't until later, when I saw Emma and Jake making their way onto the dance floor, that I realized I had made a mistake. The surprise party I had organized was meant to be a gift for Jake, but now it was going to be about us. Emma was still hurt by the unexpected twist, and I could tell she was having a hard time letting go of her initial disappointment. So, as I watched my friends dance together, I realized I had to make things right. I just hoped it wasn't too late. After all, the reception was still in full swing, and I had one last chance to make amends. The next day, my phone was flooded with messages from Jake. Dude, I'm sorry. I got caught up in the moment. Please don't be mad. But you know what was missing from all these texts? Any real understanding of what he'd done wrong. It was all about him and his feelings. He seemed to think that because he was the best man, he could do whatever he wanted, and I would just have to accept it. Newsflash, Jake. Being the best man doesn't give you a free pass to steal the spotlight. And to make matters worse, the whole night played out like a movie in my head. I relived the embarrassment, the awkward conversations, and the annoyance of feeling like I was stuck in the background. My friends were all trying to talk me down, telling me that I overreacted, and that Jake didn't mean to hurt me. But honestly, it stung. I had always thought of myself as Jake's partner in crime, someone who could help him make the wedding weekend unforgettable. But in the end, we had the last laugh. We put on a show that none of our guests would ever forget, a night that they would talk about for years to come. And you know what? It was even more beautiful because we had to fight for it. 2 weeks had passed since the wedding, and Jake seemed to be trying so hard to brush off the event that had recently transpired. "Come on, man, it made the wedding more memorable," he exclaimed, attempting to downplay the significance of his actions. More memorable? Yeah, like a car crash is memorable. We couldn't help but chuckle at his ridiculous notion. As we sat at the local coffee shop, sipping on our early morning lattes, I decided to put Jake on the spot. "So, how was it, watching the ceremony unfold, knowing you were about to steal the spotlight?" I asked, a sly grin spreading across my face. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding eye contact. It was fine, I guess." I raised an eyebrow. "Fine. That's quite an understatement, don't you think?" Trying to deflect the conversation, Jake changed the subject. "So what's new with you? How's life been treating you lately?" I wasn't having it. I leaned in, my voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. I knew he couldn't resist the excitement and anticipation in my words. "Come on, Jake. Be honest. You know we've been in this together for years. What happened?" He took a deep breath, then let out a dramatic sigh. All right. You want to know the truth? It was exhilarating, okay? Watching Sarah walk down that aisle, knowing I had the power to mess it up, it was like a controlled chaos. I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Controlled chaos, huh? Sounds like a movie title. Jake chuckled, clearly relieved to have shared his secret with me. Yeah, something like that. We arrived at Jake and Emma's wedding a year after their whirlwind romance began, and we were excited to celebrate with them. Sarah and I had a few secrets up our sleeves. Not just the news that we were expecting our first child, but also the fact that we had another surprise planned. As the DJ was setting up for the reception, we huddled in the corner of the dining hall, nervously grinning at each other. 10 minutes before the first dance, we took a deep breath and slipped out into the hallway. I grabbed a mic from the soundboard and made my way to the center stage just as the lights dimmed and the music began. We'd crafted a script, counting down the beats to give us just enough time to deliver our announcement without upstaging the happy couple. And then, at exactly the right moment, I raised my voice, and we shared the news with the entire room. The reaction was instantaneous. Jake's jaw dropped, Emma gasped, and the crowd erupted into applause and cheers. We beamed with pride, our surprise taking center stage for a moment. The look on Jake's face was absolutely priceless, a mix of shock and excitement, maybe even a dash of embarrassment. How's that for stealing someone's thunder? Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of our own happy adventure. The room broke out into a frenzy of congratulations and well wishes, with Jake and Emma rushing over to join the family celebration. We stood there, beaming with joy, as the crowd swirled around us, everyone clamoring for more details about our little bundle of joy. Amidst all the commotion, we exchanged a glance. A secret shared between two friends who'd just pulled off the ultimate wedding plot twist. Things got interesting when Jake's marriage started falling apart 6 months later. Turns out, proposing to someone during your best friend's wedding isn't exactly a solid foundation for a lasting relationship. Who knew? He started calling me constantly, asking for advice, a place to stay, money, you name it. Emma had left him, and he was a mess. I tried to be supportive, I really did. But it started to feel like I was getting more than just a toll-free helpline service. I was now on speed dial for his emotional support hotline, and it seemed like he had no intention of paying his own way. We would meet up, or he would come crashing into my place, and things would escalate quickly. The conversation would start with a casual, "Hey, I just needed to talk," and before I knew it, he'd be sobbing uncontrollably about how he ruined his life, and he had no one to blame but himself. His guilt-ridden monologues became the highlight of my week. It was like he thought I was a therapist or something. Newsflash, I'm a party planner, not a relationship counselor. But hey, I supposed it was flattering that he thought I had all the answers. It wasn't until Emma left him for good that I realized the full extent of his desperation. He started calling me every 5 minutes, and then every hour, and then every 10 minutes. I started to feel like I was under surveillance. I'd be at work, and my phone would blow up with a flurry of texts and calls from Jake. I couldn't even get a minute's peace to edit the wedding photo booth pics without him begging for money or a shoulder to cry on. Despite the chaos he brought into my life, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for the guy. He may have been an irresponsible fiancé, but deep down, I knew he was just trying to pick up the pieces of a shattered love story. He eventually stopped showing up at my doorstep, but the phone calls and texts continued. It was as if he thought we were still friends after everything that had happened. It was like he needed a friend, but had no idea how to actually be one. And that's when it hit me. Perhaps the real tragedy wasn't Jake's failed marriage, but his inability to take responsibility for his own actions. Maybe he wasn't just searching for a shoulder to cry on. Maybe he was searching for a scapegoat. As I eventually tuned him out and told him politely but firmly that I wasn't his personal therapist, I couldn't help but think that Jake needed a serious reality check. The last time we spoke, Jake tried to guilt trip me. "We're supposed to be best friends," he said, his voice laced with anger and desperation. "You're supposed to help me through tough times." It was clear that Jake was struggling, and for a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered something that had been burning a hole in my mind since our last conversation. I finally told him what I should have said at my wedding. Best friends respect each other's boundaries. Best friends don't make someone else's special day about themselves. I said it firmly, without hesitation, and watched as the guilt gave way to anger in Jake's eyes. "You're really going to do this?" he spat, his voice dripping with bitterness. "You're really going to stand by that cliché?" I just shrugged, a small, satisfied smile spreading across my face. I knew I was right, and I was determined to stand by what I believed in, even if it meant losing my best friend. The days that followed were difficult, to say the least. Jake and I didn't speak for weeks, and I was left to pick up the pieces of our shattered friendship. But I knew I had made the right decision. I had set a boundary, and in doing so, I had taken back control of my life. As I looked back on the situation, I realized that Jake's behavior had been controlling, and that our friendship had been unbalanced for far too long. I had been enabling him, allowing him to push my boundaries and dictate how I should behave. But no more. I may have lost Jake as a friend, but in doing so, I gained something much more valuable. The knowledge that I was worth respecting, that my boundaries were real, and that I had the strength to stand up for myself. I'm still laughing about it to this day. And when I say laughing, I mean crying with my head in my hands. It's a memory that still brings a smile to my face every time I think about it. Looking back now, I realize this whole experience taught me something important about friendship and respect. Sometimes the people we trust the most can let us down in the biggest ways. I mean, who doesn't love a best man who's always ready to crack a joke and have a good time? But when it came time to give his speech at my wedding, my best man took it to a whole new level. Not only did he sabotage the entire ceremony, but he also managed to upstage me in front of our entire guest list. It was crazy, to say the least. I'm still not sure how he managed to pull it off without anyone noticing, but I guess that's just part of what makes him such a great stand-up comedian. But let me tell you, it wasn't just funny at the time. It was a total nightmare. As I stood there at the altar, watching my best man take over the show and steal all the attention, I couldn't help but feel a little bit frustrated, or maybe even a little bit upset. I mean, wasn't this my special day, supposed to be all about me and my new wife? But as I looked out at the crowd and saw how entertained everyone was, I realized that maybe this was actually working out after all. And hey, if someone tries to steal your thunder, remember, karma has a way of working things out. Just ask Jake, if you can find him on whatever couch he's crashing on these days. You know, it's funny. I always thought that Jake was the type of guy who would never do anything to hurt me. But boy, was I wrong. As I look back on that day, I realized that it was actually a really valuable lesson in standing up for myself. Sometimes, we need to take a step back and remember that our own needs and feelings are important too. So don't be afraid to speak up and set those boundaries. You never know how it might turn out in the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more crazy stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, what's the craziest thing you've ever seen at a wedding? Trust me, I'll understand. And hey, who knows? Maybe one day I'll even get to tell the story of how Jake finally learned his lesson.